I feel like it's so powerful to not feel ashamed of any aspect of your being, your mind, your spirit, your heart. So I try to be as candid as possible about my life and what I'm going through.
You've been drawn to the arts throughout your life. It started out with violin when you were a kid, moved into modeling, and then later on in your teens into acting, which you're still doing today. Talk about the origin of that. What pulled you in?
For violin, so my father played drums with Billy Joel for 30 years. And on the Stormfront tour, it was the only tour that they had a violinist on tour with them. And her name was Mindy. And I was just so enamored with her. And my parents said I followed her everywhere she went. And at the end of the tour, I asked them if I could play violin. And my dad's only question to her was, will she lose her hearing? Because my dad was pretty deaf from his years of playing the drums and how that affected his hearing. So she said, no, she should be good. And my parents signed me up for lessons. And then it kind of like, just kind of went from there. I feel like violin taught me how to be a performer. And I remember seeing Les Mis when I was 7 years old for the first time on Broadway. And I was so in love with that play. And I just wanted to perform all of Eponine's parts. And I would make my dad be the male lead. And I was just like, so in love with it. And then when I was about 15, some people had mentioned to my mom, like, oh, maybe you should put her in modeling or whatever. And when I was in modeling, I didn't really love it. I loved the opportunity that I got to be, between the ages of 15 and 17, traveling to Miami and Chicago and Japan by myself without any parental guidance. That was a lot of fun. But as far as modeling went, it wasn't really my thing. And a photographer told my mom she thought I was pretty shy in front of the camera and suggested acting classes. And so I got into acting class when I was like 15 years old and was like, oh, this is what I want to do, not that. This is the direction I want to go. So that's all. That's kind of the abridged version of how we got here today.
And then at 18 years old, you packed up your bags and moved to LA.
Literally 18. I was 17. I had met a casting director who came through Florida where I was taking acting class and where I was going to high school. And she gave a seminar and she said, when you're ready, I can set you up with some meetings to meet managers. So I flew out to LA when I was still 17, met with some managers, picked one that I loved that I'm actually still with today, which I was 17 when I signed with him and I'm 37 now. So it's been 20 years. And then I waited till June to turn 18 and I packed up my Explorer Sport and my mom helped me drive to California, and that was it.
Well, you have this interesting dynamic because on one hand, like we're talking about here, you're tied into acting and the Hollywood world. And then you also have this passion in health and wellness and alternative health.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the origin to the latter.
I'm not really sure. I know that when I was a kid, I really had this thing where I loved asking a lot of questions, especially when people told me I should believe the way something was. And I was always asking questions and I also loved information. So I remember when I was a kid, like, if whether it was Greek mythology or paranormal activity, whatever it was, like, I just wanted to like learn all the information about it. And we didn't have Google like we do today. So that was more going to the library and reading books or whatever. But I think I was always looking for alternative ways or alternative options. And I just wasn't satisfied with what I was being told growing up all across the board as far as wellness and health and spirituality. And so it wasn't until I was in my 20s where I kind of started carving out my own path and really started falling in love with, I remember I found this, and he's not there anymore, but he was this man that had this little tea shop it was a Chinese herb shop in LA. And I remember I had lost my voice and I got so sick and I was like, oh my gosh, it was on set for One Tree Hill. I have to fly there. Like, I can't, I have to have a voice. And I went there and he made me this like elixir and all this stuff. And my voice was back the next day. I was like, oh, and that was the first time I think I realized I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, but it makes sense. Like, back in the day, all we had was herbs and, all these ways of healing ourselves. So that kind of sparked that in me a lot.
And other than being inquisitive as a kid, did you have any parents or other people that you looked up to that had alternative views and did things a little bit differently?
You know what? No, actually. So I feel like my mom always says that I introduced this to her now, these ways as she likes to call them. But no, and I think that was actually a point of frustration for me as a kid because I think I always had these other ideas of how I wanted to view things or look at things. And my parents were always so supportive of me thinking however I wanted to think. Um, but I can't help but know that they definitely thought there was a lot of things that were weird. Do you know what I mean? I think my mom has shaken her head and said to me like, "Who raised you?" so many times. But I was always I went on a journey with that too because I was always looking for some sort of a mentor. Like I always wanted to find some woman that was older than me that spoke the same language that I was trying to learn and could really teach me about these things. And I feel like I feel like I kind of still search for that sometimes. And I never really locked into that or found that. And then I went on this journey where I was doing some spirituality work and I realized like, oh, everything I am searching for externally, I already have. So that kind of became my path as well. But yeah, no, I didn't really grow up around anybody using alternative medicine or anything like that.
In these days, do you have anybody in your world, either, in the acting world or family and friends, that you can talk about these things with? Because for me, a big important part of, like, I live a lot of the same, ways and ways of thinking that I'm sure you do, but my wife is right on board. So the two of us can have conversations and get each other. So what I'm
Yeah,
getting at is, do you have people in your life right now that get you on this level that you can connect with and share that excitement over these different ways of thinking and being?
I do. I luckily I feel like through my industry, a lot of actors are kind of uh, most that I've worked with are into like um, health and wellness and stuff. So through my work, I've actually met some people, but I do have a couple really close girlfriends that have the same ideology as me, and we get to share things with each other. It's like I found this, and it made me think of you because I know you're struggling with this right now. Why don't you try this? So I do have a couple girlfriends, but I actually just said to my boyfriend the other night, I was like, I really want to call in more um, friends right now, like to meet more people that really are aligned with my way of thinking. You know what I mean? Like, I want to really meet someone that I can, travel in the way or that wants to go camping with me and do all these like in the dirt things with me because I don't have many friends that I don't think want to do all that stuff with me. So, yeah, I'm in the process of calling that in right now.
And when it comes to your boyfriend, is he on board? Is he kind of guide some of this stuff, or does he just go with the flow?
Kind of all of the above. He's so supportive. He just kind of either giggles along at me or is interested and listens. He loves listening to me talk about this stuff, which I think is so important to me too. You know what I mean? He's such a great listener and super supportive with it. So yeah, he doesn't make me feel like a stranger in my own house. That's for sure.
Anything you're really geeking out in the health and wellness space these days?
Um, so I watched that documentary, Fantastic Fungi, which I have to say I was really shocked because all the scientists there called it fungi, and I'd never heard it called that before. Like, there's the jokes like, "Hey, fun guy," you know what I mean? Like, so I was a little confused by that, but that's a side note. Um, but I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to start incorporating the health benefits of all these different kinds of mushrooms." And I'm not talking about psychedelic mushrooms, but the health benefits of and seeing the function of mushrooms in these forests. And it was just like it was mind blowing. I didn't really know the intricacy of mushrooms.
Well, what about that drink you talked about before that kind of turned you on to health and wellness? Was there certain herbs and mushrooms in that?
Oh, it's so funny. I was like 23 years old. I don't even think I looked at what was in it. I was just like, drink this? Sure. But I'm sure there were. I'm sure there were.
So what mushrooms have you been turned on to?
So I've been, so I had like a shoulder thing going on for the last 2 years. And so I've been taking this one formula for anti-inflammatory, and I forget what exactly it's called. And then I started taking some turkey tail powder and putting it in my drink, which has been really lovely. I've been mixing that with ashwagandha and some other things for some calming benefits. And then I've been testing around with some reishi, which has been pretty awesome too.
It sounds like you're on some really good stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. Feels good.
Well, another pivotal moment along your health and wellness journey was becoming vegetarian around 15 years ago. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the catalyst for that.
Yeah, so actually, it's a weird story. I was with an ex-boyfriend of mine, and he had gone on a fishing trip, and he was saying how he has never actually had to kill and prep the fish after he was done fishing. And he was explaining it to me, and I remember I like had this moment where I was like, yeah, I've never had to do that either. I've been fishing before when I was a kid in Michigan with my grandfather or whatever, but I'd never had to do the hard part of, killing the animal. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, we're not in like caveman times anymore. I was like, I don't really know that I need to eat these things. And I was like, also, if I don't know how to honor it to kill it myself, should I even be eating it? And I had this like aha moment, and I like looked at him, I was like, I'm never eating meat again. And he was like, what? I was like, I'm done. I'm done. Your story. And I really didn't since then. I was still dabbling in fish. And then when somebody explained to me, I didn't even know about overfishing and the nets and how it was affecting all the other marine life, like the dolphins and sharks. And when I learned about that, that's when I quit eating fish as well. But yeah, I've never looked back. And I always say, like, I really cannot imagine a world in which I would go back to eating meat.
I know it's a long time ago, 15 years, but
Yeah.
can you think back and remember any changes you noticed, either emotionally, physically, when you made that switch? Because that's a big change.
I remember realizing how much junk food is vegetarian because I was like, oh my gosh, because I think the biggest misconception is like, oh, oh, she's so skinny, she must be a vegetarian. And it's like, no, when you go vegetarian at first, like I was just eating all carbs, like pasta, bread. Like I was like, ooh, Oreos are vegan. This is great. I can eat like all this stuff. So, that transition was interesting for me having to figure out, okay, this is really fun, but this is not sustainable. How can I do this in a healthy way? What is food that is good for me? How can I incorporate a rainbow diet and make sure I'm getting all the colors and make sure I'm getting all the nutrients I need and not just eating, Doritos, Oreos, and pasta?
Well, it was the ethics that brought you in, but over the years, has the health benefits been a part of the equation as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel I've never gotten tested for a lot of stuff, but I know I have like abnormally low cholesterol, and I definitely attribute that to being a vegetarian. Um, I feel it's not just a physical thing for me. I feel like spiritually lighter, which I know sounds a little hokey to some people, but I remember saying this to my boyfriend recently because I go in and out of vegan, vegetarian, vegan, vegetarian. The goal is to stay vegan, but sometimes I mess up. But I said to him, I was like, when I stick to being vegan and I just do it, it's not even like what I'm feeling physically. Spiritually, I feel so much lighter. Because I remember reading this thing once where somebody was talking about how like me going like this is like an energetic wave that lasts for eternity, right? So everything we do. And I was like, what if we spent our whole day just trying to put out the most gentle, loving vibrations that last for eternity all day long? And I feel that way with my food. Like, at the end of the day, when I know that no living creature was harmed in the way I chose to live my life today, it just makes my soul feel a lot lighter.
And again, you've been doing this for a long time, and I know your boyfriend and you haven't been together near as long as that. How does he feel about your eating this way? And is it rubbing off on him at all?
I will say he did do a week vegan challenge. And on the first day, I looked over and he was eating a Caesar salad. And he was like, "What? This isn't vegan?" I was like, "You probably have anchovies in the dressing, and there's definitely dairy." But I thought it was really sweet because, that's the thing that I think people need to really give themselves grace. When you try, you can't shame someone and be like, "Oh, but that's not vegan." It's like, it takes a minute to really realize, "Oh, I didn't," you know what I mean? So, but he did a week vegan thing. I don't think it's going to be a forever thing for him, but you never know. But when I cook, he eats like everything I eat. He's never asked me to, cook meat, and he loves, like, when we go to restaurants, we split, a lot of food together, and sometimes he'll get, his own thing that has meat in it, but for the most part, like, he totally accommodates all of my vegetarian needs. So he's super supportive, and if it is rubbing off, I don't know that he would admit it right now. So
Talk more about that piece about, two people in a relationship eating in different ways, because it sounds like there's some overlap there and he's very accepting, which is awesome. But I think there's a lot of people that live this way, and I could see how it would become a challenge and frustrating when it comes to making meals. How have you guys, just in getting in a little bit more detail, how do you guys navigate that?
um, you know, it's really not that difficult. I feel like for me, I try to be very non-judgmental in my approach to the things that I love, because I am full well aware that everybody's path is their own. I cannot impose what I'm thinking, feeling, wanting, or needing on anybody else, and especially not the person that I love the most. And in sharing a home with someone too, you just have to, like, you have to honor how they want to live, and as much as you want them to honor you. And so it really doesn't bother me. And even if he asks me to pick him something up from the grocery store or whatever, yes, I'll say like a little prayer over it or something. But you can't force somebody to do something they're not ready to do. And I have mostly, I'd say most of my friends or anybody I've ever dated before has never been vegetarian like me. I think there was one time I dated someone who was very similar in my way of being and believing and writing, just everything. And I was like, this is horrible. I don't want to date me, like, at all. What's fun and interesting about that?
It shined the mirror back on you, eh?
Totally, totally, totally.
Talk about being on set and living this different way of eating and living, because, you mentioned earlier how a lot of people in that world are starting to embrace health and wellness, or are embracing it. But obviously, the decisions and the way you live is different than most. How do you go about navigating that on set?
Um, you know, Luckily it's becoming more common, and what's great about sets is when you're going onto a new set. I mean, unless you're like a guest star for the day or just doing like a small recurring or something, but when you're going onto like a new show or a movie, normally they reach out to you and see if you have any dietary restrictions and this and that. So you can really make it clear to them, like, "Hey, can you just make sure to have some like vegetarian vegan snacks for me?" Or if there's a scene coming up where I have to eat, like if it's meat or something, I'm like, "Can you make sure to get Beyond Meat so I'm not actually eating it?" So and they're always really good about that. So
So, when it comes to the plant based way of living, there's usually three different pieces to that puzzle: ethics, which we talked about, health, and then sustainability. So, let's talk about how you go about thinking about sustainability when it comes to the way you live.
yeah, that's really important. And I feel like my diet started off for morals and ethics, and then totally transitioned into sustainability and honoring what our planet needs at the moment. I watched that documentary, Cowspiracy, And I had no idea what went into factory farming and how much water and the gas, that's put out into the. I'm so bad at regurgitating actual information, but I think you know what we're talking about, that whole documentary. And then when I learned about the overfishing and what that was doing to our oceans, and I recently watched the David Attenborough, the latest documentary he did, um, saying that by the, I think, year of like 2050 or something, if we keep going at this rate, our oceans will be empty. And I was like, so for me too, I think that's another reason. I think even if I was like dying and someone's like, but you have to eat this, I'd be like, no, I just feel like at this point in time, we need a big shift. And sure, you don't have to go to the full extreme, but if everybody just like did 1 day a week without meat, it would change things exponentially. But the problem is, I don't think everybody gets this information. Do you know what I mean? I don't think everybody knows even what dire straits our planet is in, but also I don't think everybody knows that the slightest thing we could all, if we all did it, like 1 day a week, it would make such a massive change. So,
And what about when it comes to things like clothing, different cosmetics you use? How does that fit into this?
yeah. So, I think that really helped when I decided to go vegetarian and vegan. I had this like aha moment when I was wearing, I think I bought like a pair of boots that were leather and I'd never thought anything of it. And then I was like, wait a second, I'm wearing a hamburger, but I won't eat it. That makes no sense. So then I started researching vegan fashion. And then I had booked the Chicago Med and I came out to Chicago and I needed winter clothes. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these like duck feathers. And then reading about the fur that was on, I don't want to misquote it. I think it was coyote fur they found on like Canada geese, Canadian geese, Canadian goose. What is it? That jacket. Anyways, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to wear that. Like, so I had to find really durable, good winter jackets that were vegan too. And it became like a fun project for me. Where I would find these like vegan companies. And then I started realizing, a lot of people would say to me, yeah, well, some of that vegan leather is actually worse for the planet than, you know, wearing real leather. So then I had to do some research on that. And I was like finding these companies that were not just making vegan fashion, but they were also making sustainable fashion and eco-friendly fashion. So it honestly brings so much joy when I find these great companies that make beautiful clothing that is sustainable or compostable. One of my favorite dress designers, Christy Dawn, she makes clothing that is not just eco-friendly, but it actually gives back because her dresses are compostable. And I was like, how cool is that? So, I'm not perfect. I definitely like one of the things I tell people when they're trying to do this, I'm like, do not go through your clothes and get rid of everything. There are still leather shoes from 10 years ago before I was aware of this that I have and I will bring out and wear because that's wasteful. You don't want to be wasteful. It's already in my closet. I bought it a long time ago. So go one thing at a time. You know what I mean? And if you buy something and you realize, oh, shoot, I didn't research this. This wasn't sustainable, do better the next time. You know what I mean? Just like be easy on yourself because I find that the harder I am on myself, the worse I do. So,
Being easy is key. And I also want to highlight the fact that there are all these companies. We're in a really abundant time right now where the
yeah.
health and wellness message is really starting to spread. And you've talked about different documentaries. I think that's a really powerful medium for getting information out there and books and podcasts. So, luckily for people that want to make more well thought out decisions, whatever that is
Yes.
for them, they're able to find different opportunities in the market.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like we are becoming more conscious. And like you said, the documentaries and the books, and even in cafes now, like I remember I went over to Scotland and I thought, okay, it's going to be difficult, to find. And there were so many vegan options everywhere I went. And that's when I realized like, wow, this is really like globally becoming so much easier. Cause I remember traveling in my 20s, it wasn't that easy. And now traveling, I mean, in Edinburgh, there was uh, vegan graffiti. Like it was like set on the side of these castles, like save the cows. And I was like, what is happening right now? So I do think people are becoming more aware, which is great.
And a big part of your journey is recently you decided to restore a farm up in Michigan. I want to talk about this
Yeah.
chapter. I'm not sure where you're at in that process, but I know that's a more recent thing. Where are you
Yes.
at along that? And how does that fit into this whole lifestyle that you're living?
Yeah. So, well, I got the farm, during the pandemic. I had this moment where, like a lot of people, I was like, oh my gosh, the planet is going to combust. We need to have a bunker. I want a safe space for all my family and friends. So I bought this land in Michigan, and it had a barn. It was used as an event space though for weddings and whatnot. So I redid the inside to make it more of a home, and I really got it in the hopes of turning into a dog hospice. I got it in honor of one of my dogs who had passed, Twigs, and she really inspired me to create this safe space for dogs like her who were really old and really sick and have a hard time getting adopted, just to spend their final years or whatever, on the farm. It's at the place where it's definitely ready, but I never got it with the intention of living there full time. So I'm still in the process of trying to figure out how to cultivate this and how to honor the land the best that I can while not being there all the time, or maybe having somebody there for me. So it's still in the preliminary process, but I have high hopes for it.
We'll talk about some of those hopes. I mean, you talked about being in the pandemic and thinking about, bunkering or whatever
Yeah.
terminology you use there, but is part of the hope of this farm. You mentioned the dogs being the catalyst, but are you thinking of growing food? Are you thinking of living different, living a more alternative lifestyle when you're spending time there?
Yeah, absolutely. What's hilarious about all of this, it's so funny. It's funny the assumptions that get put on you when you say you're vegetarian or vegan, or, live this holistic life. I'm a terrible gardener. I kill everything, not on purpose. Plants in the house. I try so hard. I'm so bad at it. I don't know what it is. So that is kind of my goal this year, is to do more research in that and learn why I'm so horrible at it and try and get better. My mom is so great at growing things, and she lives 10 miles down the road from my farm. So this summer, I plan on going there a lot. What's great is it's such an easy drive for me from Chicago to Michigan. So I'm going to go there a lot, and I'm really going to pick at my mom's wisdom of gardening, because what I would love to do as well. I mean, I watched that documentary, The Big Little Farm, I think.
The
Did
Biggest
you see
Little
that
Farm.
one?
Yeah,
The Biggest Little Farm. Yeah.
they've actually been on the show in the past.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was amazing. But I love how they finally made it so that everything lives off itself, and it all works in flow in that way. And I was like, oh, I would love that. So I just have to figure out what to grow, how to grow it. So that's going to be a process as well, but I'm excited to learn about it.
Yeah, it sounds like an exciting new chapter. Lots of learning, lots of research.
Lots of learning.
Are you doing any reading right now? Researching any books that you're really into?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, I've been reading a lot of fiction lately. I actually was up in Canada doing a film, and I read like 5 books while I was up there. I've been really into story. I just read this one book, The Heart's Little Furies, that was amazing. And I'm about to start this book that I started a book club on my Instagram, actually, and it's called Transcendence, and that's our April book club. So I'm starting that one today. I just finished a memoir last night called Priest Daddy that one of my best friends, Marina, gave to me for Christmas. So I'm starting Transcendence today because I have to finish it before the month's over. And then also, I recently spoke with Elisa Vitti, who does Flow Living. She does works in women's health, and I read her first book, Women's Code, which was amazing. And so she has a new book called Living in the Flow that I just received, and I can't wait. I think every female from like the ages 12 years old and up should read her book. actually a little disheartening reading it in my early 30s and learning about my female body for the first time in a way that somebody should have taught me when I was in middle school. You know what I mean? So it's really good work.
And what was it specifically that was so impactful of having that reading?
I didn't know, she teaches you about each, women go through 4-week cycles. I didn't know what they were called, that what each cycle was called. I didn't know how to live in accordance to those cycles. And I didn't know that women are not meant to suffer for their cycles. We're not meant to suffer like we do through PMS and this and that. And there's a lot of endocrine disruptors that actually create more cramping in our bodies. And she teaches you how to eat per each cycle, that during ovulation you should be eating more raw foods and doing I forget which exercises, and that's when you should take your meetings and this and that. And then when you're in different phases, you're supposed to be eating different ways, and you're not supposed to do strength training all throughout the month. You're only supposed to do it during that 1 week, and then you do like a more restorative workout. And when you live within your flow and you live in accordance to your cycle, you live in your optimal health. And I think that's one thing that people forget. It is our like earthly God-given right to feel healthy and feel good, but the way we've kind of constructed our society is I feel like it is very challenging for us to get healthy foods and live, with the moon and the moon cycles and our own cycles and this and that. So, yeah, really getting back to basics, I think, is important.
That really reminds me of a previous guest that was on the show recently talking about intermittent fasting for women. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of times when intermittent fasting comes up, we're talking about men, not specifically, but when we're not relating to women. And it was just interesting to talk about women in different phases of their life, perimenopause, menopause, even
Yeah.
during the cycle before perimenopause, and how as women, you need to honor the different times that your body's going through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is intermittent fasting something you've played with?
I have actually. I have. And you know what's funny? I normally do it mostly when I'm on set. And people think, oh God, that's got to be so challenging. But actually, when I'm on set, I can be more regimented, because when I'm off set, it's like, oh yeah, I want to go meet some girlfriends for dinner this night, or you know what I mean? It makes it more difficult, or like, I want to stay up late for my boyfriend to get home and then want to have some chocolate while we watch a movie or something. But when I'm on set, I have nothing else to do, especially if I'm on location. So, yeah, I've done it. I've done it a couple times. And what's funny is when I was talking to Elisa, the author I was just telling you about, she was saying there's a certain part of our cycle where we actually need to eat like 200 more calories a day than we need to. And I remember during intermittent fasting, that 1 week was always the hardest for me. Like every other week was pretty easy and actually makes me feel good. I feel like it's a fun way to kind of like cleanse out and get back on like a good cycle. But yeah, so I enjoyed it. Have you done it?
Yeah, I do it. And I
Yeah.
find for me, I think a lot more clearly. Usually during the week, I'm more regimented about it. On the weekends with family, I'm a little more laxed and we'll have breakfast together or go out for a nice brunch. But during the week, I usually don't eat until around lunchtime. And I
Yeah.
usually after dinner, and again, you mentioned chocolate in a movie. Like if we're going to watch a movie, we're not going to be I'm
Right.
not going to be a stickler about it. There's certain pros and cons of each decision we make. So, but I am a big fan, and I find that in the morning when I'm in that fasted state, I can really think a lot more clear, and
Yeah.
I just feel lighter. I just feel good.
I agree. I agree. When I start too early, when I do the intermittent fasting and I don't eat that early, that heavy, I do feel a lot clearer too. And I also like once I eat that big meal in the morning, then it's like, oh, but then I want this. And then I'm just like find myself snacking all day and getting more fatigued easier. And yeah, I do. I like intermittent fasting.
What I like to do though during the morning, and I know you're not a big fan of caffeine, I like to have green tea and coffee in the morning during that period of time. And that also obviously helps ramp me up and get me thinking clear as well.
Yeah.
Talk about your relationship with caffeine and how that's really not much of a thing.
Yeah, I have anxiety. And I realized I stopped drinking caffeine years ago, and I don't remember what sparked it. I don't remember. But, anyways, I stopped. And once I got past the headaches, I started realizing that, yes, I still had some anxiety that would come up, but it went down like exponentially. And had the realization, I was like, oh my goodness, caffeine is so ramping up this anxious feeling in me. And, if like I just had to do a road trip by myself from Florida to Chicago, I definitely drank caffeine that day because I was like, I'm gonna have it makes me feel like I'm going out partying. Like I'm gonna be bad. I'm getting a full latte with caffeine, and then I like feel like I'm like so hyped up. Um, but so, every once in a while, but when I do it, I get that I just have this like overriding like tickle in my chest all day long from it. And I'm like, oh God, that's so, and it's crazy how everybody's different. My boyfriend could drink caffeine all day and he's cool as a cucumber. I have it and I'm like,
Well, I
so
think the way you use it is healthy, using it as a tool, because if you are somebody, including myself, that has it on a daily basis, you don't get that same effect. And for you, if you're on a road trip and you're using it as a tool to, you know, put on
it
some
works.
music and have fun and get the drive done in one day, then that could be helpful in that case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned anxiety there. I want to talk about your mental health and the journey with that over the years. When did that begin for you? And then again, you mentioned the caffeine, cutting that being a big help when it came to anxiety. I want to talk about other tools and things you've done to help with that.
Yeah. So I pretty much always had anxiety. And I started meditating in my 20s, and that really helped a lot. Finding a spiritual practice that works for me helped a lot as well. Cutting out caffeine really helped. But I realized, I kind of thought, oh, I was over this hump with it, right? And then I started realizing that I still had a lot of triggers in my life. There's a lot of ways that anxiety presents for me that I'm still trying to figure out what exactly it is, and, intrusive thoughts and things that I can't look at that make me uncomfortable, and places I can't sit because I'm uncomfortable, or places I can't walk barefoot because I'm worried about this. It just is like this. And I've gotten so used to it that I realize that because I am pretty calm person and have this practice, I've gotten so used to it that I thought, oh, that's just normal. And then actually, as of late, I went to go see my energy healer that I love so much, Janet Raftis, in Atlanta, actually last week. And I had these 2 fantastic days with her. And a lot of my intention those days were working on this anxiety that I feel like is really kind of interfering with my life on a daily basis. Um, and I decided to look up an actual therapy center here in Chicago that works with cognitive behavioral therapy and works specifically with OCD and anxiety. And I've never taken that approach before. I love therapy. I've been in therapy forever, but I've never gone specifically for anxiety and OCD. And so I'm doing that. And I was actually sharing this morning that, it felt so good getting this information from this therapist, because I was like, realized how much I had just been living with. It's just, having an overactive amygdala, just thinking, oh, that's like normal. Being in fight or flight all the time it's just normal. And it's not. So, um, I love mixing things like therapy with, spirituality and meditation, and, drinking things like elixirs like ashwagandha and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I'm still definitely on the journey of anxiety and all those other things.
And when it came to this energy healer in Atlanta, was she able to directly help you? I know she helped guide you to this next way you're going to, approach things, this therapy, but were you able to release anything there? And if so, what did she do?
Yeah, whenever I work with her, so much goodness comes up. I love it so much. She did a whole healing session on me. She's a Reiki master, so she did Reiki on me, which was great. And we actually did a past life regression, which I know for some people that sounds a little scary, but it was so fantastic. And a lot came up for me there as well. And then she's very intuitive, and we did, oracle part card readings and all this kind of different stuff. So, just being able to kind of, what was great is I think I was hiding it, thinking, oh, I'd gotten, I've said it in so many interviews too. I was like, yeah, I used to have anxiety. I don't really that much anymore. And then pulling it out and realizing, like, no, I've just gotten so used to it. And so that was a huge moment in the session for me.
And when it comes to your anxiety, it sounds like it's been with you for a long time. Is this something that goes like as far back as you can, envision? And is it something that runs in the family?
Yes. Yeah. On my mom's side of the family, there's a lot of anxiety and depression throughout my mom's side of the family. So it's definitely something that is comforting in a sense that I know I can talk. I have certain cousins that I reach out to who I know struggle with it like I do. I can talk to my mother about it. She's definitely dealt with anxiety and she understands it. And um, it's definitely something that we're all very open about communicating about. So it's not something that, stays hidden or we don't talk about. Everybody in my family is pretty open about it, which is really lovely because it gives us a space to just be free and open about it. But yeah, it definitely runs heavy in my family.
Well, and I think it's so important as a public figure, you're open to sharing this and being vulnerable about your challenges and your successes. And it just gives people out there who are suffering as well, a way to connect and hopefully if they need to seek somebody that they can feel comfortable doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's so important. I think there's such a stigma around mental health in general. And if I can share my story and that helps somebody else feel comfortable to seek out therapy themselves, then so be it. I feel like it's so powerful to not feel ashamed of any aspect of your being, your mind, your spirit, your heart. So I try to be as candid as possible about my life and what I'm going through.
And as somebody who is so driven and you've had so much success and you're still, a relatively young person, you have a lot ahead in your journey. Would you say that the anxiety, OCD, mental health challenges have facilitated some of that success? Been a double-edged sword. Obviously, there's suffering that's part of that equation, but has it helped you as a tool to achieve what you've achieved?
It has. And I think what's funny is I remember when I was first going to start therapy in my 20s, um, I was terrified to do it because I thought that my anxiety and depression or whatever helped me be better as an actor. I was like, well, what if I'm just like totally fine and healthy and don't have anything? Will I be able to pull up emotions as an actor? Because I know that I can cry on a drop of a hat. And that's because I carry so much stress with me. Um, I'm like, will I be as driven if I don't have my anxiety? Because my anxiety is what pops me out of the bed sometimes thinking, I got to get this done. I got to, and then I realized, that is such not ignorant. It's such just a statement without any backing because actually when I started meditating, I actually was able to go deeper with my emotions because I didn't have my stress blocking how deep I could go. And when I'm not stressed, I can actually get more done. But in the beginning, I definitely think that was a catalyst. I think, especially with artists, you notice a lot of artists are a little anxiety driven, a little stress driven, you know, suffer with depression or, other mental health things. So, yeah, I definitely think that was a part of me boosting my career in the beginning.
Talk more about the meditation piece. I think you mentioned TM is the form of meditation you do. How does that fit into day-to-day life?
Yeah, so I learned how to do transcendental meditation when I was 26. And then when I started doing more spiritual work, I started learning how to do like guided meditations and spiritual meditation. So sometimes I kind of go back and forth, which I'm such a person, I'm like, no, I have to do this one or this one. And then I kind of learn to let that go. And I just kind of sit down and do whatever meditation I feel is calling to me at the moment. But the goal is to meditate twice a day. I have to admit the afternoon meditations are really difficult. You will find an excuse to not get that 20 minutes in the hours. I'm too busy. And it's like, all right, well, how many minutes did you sit on Instagram for? You couldn't have been meditating instead of mindlessly scrolling. I do feel like our addictions to our phones and social media and this stuff has made that kind of practice even more challenging because our brain is like so used to being stimulated all day long. But that's why I think that the meditation is even more important now.
Talk more about the social media piece, because this is waters that is still relatively new for all of us. And you're in a unique position, again, being a public figure, having 1 million followers on Instagram. You have a lot of people that are going to see what you're putting out there, and it's a little bit different than somebody who's just using their account, with maybe some friends and whatnot. So how have you gone about navigating that in a healthy way? And what are some different things you do to keep that in check?
Yeah. Honestly, trying not to scroll a lot myself is really important. I think when you start comparing and seeing other people's lives. And when I catch myself comparing, even my hair, being like, oh, that's a really nice haircut. And I'm like, stop, get off, stop it. What are you doing? So I try my hardest to set boundaries in social media for me. Scroll time is one of them. How I present myself is another one. I really try to make it a point to be as authentic as possible, sharing my journey about anxiety. Like, I don't want anyone to meet me and never be able to look at my Instagram and be like, oh, so different. Like, I'm not the person that posts a happy day if I'm like dying inside. Do you know what I mean? Like, I try to be as, and also that goes into filters and things too. I refuse to do them because I feel like I do have a lot of young girls following me too. And I don't need them to see me having this unflawed, like fake face at 37 years old and thinking that they need to like live up to something that's not even real. You know what I'm saying? So I remember saying like no photo touching. I mean, obviously, if you do a photo shoot and there's some and it's a stylized thing, that's totally different because that to me is art and whatever the photographer wants to do. And if we're doing a specific thing, but as far as my shots on social media and what I control in that way, it was like no touching, no filter, none of that stuff. I want it to be real and just be authentically me so that what I'm putting out there, I know is not fake and is not giving anyone following me something unrealistic to live up to.
That's incredible. And it is hard because it is such a powerful tool to connect with like-minded people and learn about a lot of these, health and wellness things that we're talking about today. So it's not about totally, you know, nullifying that, but handling it in a healthy way. And I think for all of us, it's a journey, and there's going to be ebbs and flows and figuring out what works for us. And maybe there is a time when, somebody's suffering through a mental health challenge and it's better off putting it aside for a period of time. But it's an individual thing. Again, it's new waters that we're all treading, and we need to really figure that out on an individual basis.
Absolutely. Look, I fell in love with cooking and baking because of Instagram. I'd find all these recipes and I'd save them. And so there's definitely great aspects to it. You just have to be careful to not be so judgmental on each other, and the negative parts of it can be really scary, but if you focus on the positive of it, it could be good.
Have you seen the documentary Social Dilemma?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Yes,
that
I
it's been a
did.
bit since I've seen it, so I can't. It's still up there, but it's not as sharp as it was. But it was definitely eye opening, and
Oh, the fact that these tech guys that created the iPhone won't let their kids have email and all these things because of how addictive it is, I was like, hello. This is a problem. Yeah.
coming back to the mental health journey, we just hopefully we're at the tail end of this pandemic, but it's been a really stressful time for all of us.
Yeah.
Somebody like yourself that is dealing with anxiety, OCD, how did that impact you at that time and still to this day?
Um, you know, I I was one of the I liked staying home. I'm like a huge homebody. So at first I felt like this is my wheelhouse. Like I thrive in this. But what really bothered me that I think a lot of other people struggled with too was lack of inspiration. I could not, I would have thought if you would have told me I had like a year where I had to pretty much stay home, I'd been like, oh, I've definitely painted all these paintings and wrote these scripts and read 25,000 books, right? And it's like, no, you did nothing. You did nothing with your time. Um, so that was hard. I found a sloth version of myself that I know that on a day off, I can really lean into that day off. I'm good at that. I'm good at the self care, whether it's going to get a massage or staying home and just binging a show all day. I have no cares about that. I can do it. But to do that for like a year, I was just like, whoa, who is this sloth Tori that I didn't know yet? So I definitely saw a different side of myself that I struggled with. And, I think like everybody else, I wasn't happy with a lot of things. I stopped working out. I was eating excessively. I gained like a good 15, 20 pounds over quarantine. None of my clothes were fitting anymore. So then when the world started opening up again, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to go out there. And then I had to be on camera and I was like, none of my clothes fit. Like my scrubs when I went back to Chicago Med, too small. I had to go like get a whole new size of scrubs. I was like, how do you outgrow scrubs? And it's just like, and it's things that, are your own personal journey or whatever, but that stuff was challenging, and I feel like I'm finally just starting to kind of get myself back again. It's been a process.
Talk more about the self-care. You mentioned binge watching shows or getting a massage, and we talked about the meditation piece, but talk about some of the things that you do as somebody that has, maybe we'll say a little bit more anxiety than the average person. How do
Yeah.
you go about caring for yourself on a deep level?
Um, Taking those days, I need them. And I used to judge them because I was like, oh, I feel like I should be reading a book though. Why am I watching TV? Why am I getting sucked into trash TV right now? Like the Housewives of New Jersey. Like I can't just watch this all day. And then I realized that, you know what? This is my life. And if I want to order a pizza and lay on the couch and watch an entire season of The Real Housewives of Orange County or whatever, all day, that's what I'm going to do because sometimes that is what I need that day. And I know it's like such a weird juxtaposition to how I try to spend every other day, but I just realized like those days like recharge me, just like laying around, not getting out of my pajamas and just being. I think that's another pitfall we fall into, especially with social media. Sometimes it looks like, and sometimes I feel like I exude this as well on my social media that I'm just like getting up every day, getting dressed, writing a little bit in my journal every single morning, meditating, drinking so much water, just living my best life every day. And the truth is, there's some days where I lay around and watch reality TV and I'm not proud about it. You know what I mean? So yeah, but being okay with that, like you need to take self-care days. You have to. The world itself is just going way too fast these days. And, going to a cafe and sitting down and just getting a cup of coffee or decaf for me and like reading a book and just, eating something really yummy that nourishes you, whether it's cake or, a plate of nachos, you got to do it. You have to.
Well, the thing about today's world being ever connected, it's like there's always more you can do in that realm,
Yeah,
whether it be post
exactly.
another picture or scroll, or the phone is a constant distraction if you want it to be.
Yeah.
And for me specifically, somebody that works in the online world, there's always more stuff I can do. I think it's a real challenge with the internet with a lot of people. So it's
Absolutely.
good that you take time and actually
Yeah.
go back to analog and recharge the batteries.
And you know what? Taking time for my phone. is huge. I do that all the time. And my boyfriend actually teases me. I hardly ever charge my phone at night. It's always dead. I'm always losing it. Like, and I love that. Like, I really try hard to have moments during the day, like an hour at a time, where I just put my phone across the room and don't touch it. Because that's the thing, before these cell phones, we used to have cutoff times, right? Like, we'd be at home and it was disrespectful to call somebody on their house phone after a certain time at night. You know what I mean? We don't have that anymore. You'll get professional texts or emails at midnight just because people know you probably have your phone on silent and you won't see it till the next day. So there's no cutoff time. And I think we really need to create cutoff times for ourselves.
Set new boundaries.
Set boundaries, yes. Boundaries are great.
So are you somebody that when your phone is in hand and you know where it is and it's charged, you keep it out of the bedroom at night?
I try to, yeah. Sometimes I will, if I'm already laying in bed and I have it, I'll be like, oh, I don't feel like getting up. But I'll try to like either charge it. If I'm going to charge it, I'll charge it in the closet, or I try to leave it upstairs in my purse. Last night I left it in the kitchen and then came into bed and was like, and I try not to look at it first thing in the morning, but that's really hard too. Especially when I get like 15 million texts from my sister with a lot of pictures of my niece. It's like really hard not to want to look at that first thing in the morning.
I hear you. Are there any other specific things you try and do other than keep the phone out of the bedroom at night? Like there's a lot of talk these days about different hacks, to get a better sleep. Shutting off screens is one thing, but maybe blackout blinds, certain teas that you have in the evening. What are things that you do to ensure that you have a great sleep?
It's hard for me. I love drinking tea in the evening. Tea on an empty stomach actually makes me a little nauseous. I have a really pretty sensitive stomach, but then I have to go to the bathroom like 15 times within like the first hour of trying to go to sleep. So trying to cut off my water intake and my tea intake, if I'm going to go to bed, let's say at like 10 or something, trying to slow it down around 7 or 8 because I have a really small bladder. I was like, that's very important for my sleep, I realized. And then I have these like dream sprays or, that I like to spray on the pillow. And light is huge for me. I try to make it as dark as possible. And I'm very sensitive to sound. So we have an air purifier that I will turn on to help kind of tune out the sounds. Cause I'm telling you, I could hear like a pin drop from like 6 miles down. So
hearing you talk about honoring your, rest time, your self-care got me thinking about the fact that it's great that you're listening to yourself. You're taking time and listening to what you really need, which got me thinking about intuition. I'm curious if you're somebody that uses intuition as a tool, whether it be to pick your next part or whether it be something in the health and wellness space. Is that something you get pulled into and use?
yeah, absolutely. I try to listen to my intuition a lot because I've always found that I get into trouble a little bit when I don't, or I regret that I didn't when I don't. Um, and I do one of the greatest exercises somebody taught me was the yes no exercise. Because sometimes, especially if you're an anxious person, making a decision can be really difficult because you're like, oh, I want to stay in. Oh, but should I go to the movies with my friends? I don't know, blah, blah. And sitting down and closing your eyes and asking your body what yes feels like. And whether it's like an image of puppies pops up or whatever, and you can feel the yes in your body, it like kind of lights up and you're like, that's a yes. And it's like, show me what no feels like. And you'll see like an image you do not like. And you're like, oof, no. And then then you imagine yourself going through all that stuff. Like I imagine myself getting in the car, driving to the movies, seeing what that feels like. And then I imagine myself staying at home, and your body, you'll feel the no for the movies, and you're like, and then when you imagine yourself sitting on the couch watching a good movie, and then you'll like feel lit up. And I find that listening, really taking a pause and going inward and listening to that yes, no intuition is like really works.
What I find with myself when I'm making a yes, no decision, a lot of times if it's a further out decision, say a week or two, and I say yes, a lot of times when it comes time to do that thing, say it's go to the movies, I might start feeling the no as it gets closer. And I feel like this might be a human thing in general, where the further out you make that decision, the more likely it's going to be yes. And then you may regret it when it gets closer.
Oh, totally. I do that all the time. I'm like, when is it? And I'll put in my calendar. I'm like, oh, it's a month from now. Yeah, of course. And then as it gets closer, I'm like, I don't, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Yeah.
One of the tools you've talked about that's been helpful when it comes to the anxiety, the OCD, is a type of therapy called EMDR. I'd love for you to talk about what that is. Is this still something you're using these days as part of your toolkit, and what it's been able to help you through?
Yeah. So I haven't been able to do EMDR lately. The therapist that I trust and love that I've been working with over the last decade that does EMDR is in LA, and I haven't been in LA for quite some time. So, um, but I love it. So it was created for soldiers who would come back from war with PTSD. And PTSD is such a funny word to me because I was talking to my therapist about some stuff and she was like, well, you have PTSD. And I was like, no, I don't. I've never seen a dead body. I wasn't off in war, seeing traumatic, horrific events. Like I'm a very privileged human being that does not have PTSD. That sounds ridiculous. And she was like, no, but you do. And I think that I didn't want to say that because I felt like I was diminishing other really horrific things that people had been through. I felt like I didn't have the right to say that. But when she explained to me that, a kid could get PTSD from their parents' divorce, like, you know what I mean? You cannot, it's that way where you can't judge what causes PTSD in other people. Like it just is. So we started doing EMDR to kind of clear traumas from childhood or whenever that I was carrying with me now and that were affecting my relationships and my interactions in my daily life now. And it's really amazing because, and I may mess up the science, so I apologize to anybody listening, but what EMDR does is it helps. So it's either the light that you follow with your eyes that goes back and forth, or there's a vibrating thing that you put that vibrates once in each hand, like, and it helps activate each side, left and right hemisphere of your brain, which helps you access deeper memories that you won't really remember on your own. So what she does for me is okay, if I come in with a certain anxiety or something that's bothering me, she'll say, okay, where does it live? My throat, my chest, what? I'll be like, oh, it's like a tightening in my chest. Okay. I want you to just focus on the light and try to remember the first time you ever had that feeling. And normally I'd say something around like the age, like 7 is like seven, they say, is when we define what the world means to us and what love means to us and everything. So something normally will come up around then. I'll be like, oh, I remember there was a teacher that I didn't feel heard by, whatever. So every time my friend does this to me now, it makes me not feel heard like that. So then you get to go in through your mind's eye and basically reparent your child and give your inner child what you needed at that time that was lacking, and realize that nobody did that to you. Everybody was just doing the best that they could. And then you were able to reverse that trigger for you, because talk therapy is great, but it doesn't really get rid of that mind that you have. So when you step on it now, it's still there, but it doesn't blow up and explode the way it used to, because you were able to go in and kind of reparent yourself in that moment. So that's why I love EMDR so much.
Interesting. It's come up on the show a number of times. Not
Has
something
it?
I've experienced, but a lot of people are talking about it.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, I feel like it's becoming more popular, which is great. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Speaking of more popular in the mental health world, psychedelics, you mentioned them earlier. They are something that seem to be top of conversation when it comes to mental health challenges and depression and helping people, see the world in a different way.
Yeah.
And the legalization of them as well. I'm curious your thoughts on all this.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think because I was always pretty anxious, any kind of drug scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. Like I thought for sure, if I try this, I'm going to be that kid that's in the newspaper the next day. Like, look, she tried cocaine once and her heart stopped and she died. Tori's the example of why you shouldn't do drugs. So I've always been very anxious about things. But I have read some of the benefits of psychedelics and whatnot. And I think if you do things like that in a safe environment and it's controlled, and I think the scariest part of all this right now is the way these drugs are given out and laced with other things that we're unaware of. I think back in the day, they used to be a lot more pure. So if you know what you're doing is pure and it's in a controlled environment and you're with people you feel safe, then I think, great. I've seen the effects it can have that are really powerful and the benefits. So I'm all for it.
And we've talked a lot about your mental health journey and a lot of the different things you do to help with that. Any other tools on the tool belt that you found really helpful when it comes to managing anxiety, OCD, and other mental health challenges?
Calling my mom. I'm serious. Having those people, my boyfriend's really great at calming me down when I feel like things are spiraling, just calling and be like, hey, can you talk me out of this right now? And it's like, babe, it's all good. And like sometimes having someone you love say that to you really can change the course of your day. So, building that like trust community has been really beneficial.
And what would you do on a day when, your anxiety's spiking and your mind is running and you need to work and you need to be on point on set?
Yeah.
What are some things you'll do in the moment when you need to flip that switch at least to get that scene recorded or whatnot?
Yeah, hopefully I have a really emotional scene that day, and if I don't, I think that's one of the first tools my acting coach talked to me about when I first moved to LA. He's like, you got to leave it at the door. Like if you're going through something, what's great about acting other versus other jobs, if you can, you really can almost bring anything into your work, right? Your character is supposed to be human. So it's like, okay, well, what if this scene, she's going through something as well, and she's trying to hide that? How can I incorporate this in the scene? Is it appropriate? And if it's not, really breathing through it. And when you get off your chair and you go onto set, just leaving Tori at the door and knowing I will get back to you, and then doing the work. And then another important thing, you got to leave your work on set. I've made the mistake of bringing that home too many times. If you're in an emotional scene and you just can't let it go, you got to let it go. And then you can go back to Tori, and all that anxiety surely will be waiting for you to deal with later.
You mentioned taking a breath there, and that's where I wanted to go next, because this is a tool we have access to wherever we're at, and we can, channel that. And for me, when I get into doing specific breath work, it can really get me focused and clear the mind. So I'm curious, talk more about if you've used that as a tool to focus.
Yeah, I think breathing is tantamount to calming yourself down. Health. I mean, I've watched those Wim Hof videos. He is like so fascinating. And I have to be honest with you, I suck at breathing. I am horrible at any type of breathing technique, and it's something I would love to get better at. And what's ironic is whenever they're like, okay, even if I'm in a yoga class and they're like, take a deep breath, fill up your belly and let it go, it instantly makes me feel like a little overwhelmed. And I think it's because there is so much anxiety and all that stuff that I'm stuffing into my body that when I do breathe, it wants to help it come to the surface. And I'm like, no. So I've realized that I have very shallow breaths. I do not deep breathe. And what's crazy is even when I meditate, sometimes when I like come to, I'm like, was I even breathing at all? Which I know in meditation that happens sometimes, but I have very shallow breathing. So it's something I definitely want to look into because I do think it could help me so much. Because, like I said, whenever I have tried to do some breathing exercises, it makes me feel anxious. So it makes me know, okay, this is something I need for sure.
You mentioned Wim Hof there. Have you tried that breathing technique?
I did once. It was very difficult for me, but I did. He is so fascinating. I think it's like a culmination of what he can do and how he uses the breath to heal his body like that, and the way he can hold his breath for that long. I can't even hold my breath for like 5 seconds. I'm like terrible at holding and going swimming under those. And then mixed with his accent and the way he talks passionately is just like such a great combination. I love it.
He's also into the cold showers too. Have you experimented with that?
No, I've tried. I do not like. When I come out of the shower, my body is burned. Like I scorch myself, which I don't think is so great, but I love a hot shower.
Right now, when it comes to work, you mentioned you're doing some filming up in Canada. Are you in between movies or shows, or what are you doing in that respect?
Yeah, so I just wrapped up a film. It'll actually air on Hallmark on May 22nd. It's called Rip and Time. I'm actually really excited about it. It was a really great script, and I loved everybody involved. And I am actually in the process of producing and developing some things myself right now, which has been really exciting and like a whole new world for me, which I just have been having so much fun in. So yeah, so there's some stuff in development, but just waiting for what's next. I'm excited for what's next.
When can we expect to see what's in development? Is that a couple of years down the line or sooner than that?
I don't know. I think it should be sooner than that, but I'm not 100% sure yet. So I will definitely let everyone know when I know, though.
You have a lot on your hands coming up with the farm and sounds like learning the different gardening and getting into that. So that'll be
Yeah.
exciting to see how that unfolds.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I plan on putting that on my journey on my Instagram so everybody can see, where I started and then where we get to. So I'm going to share that.
Well, Torrey, really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you being so open and honest about your journey, your ups and downs. And we're going to link up your social media. We're going to link everything up in the show notes so people can connect with you. And I just want to thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you. If you enjoyed that conversation discussing healthy living with Torrey, you're going to love this one with Daphne, where she gets into how to simplify your healthy lifestyle.
Do I feel my potentials being met? Do I feel set up to succeed in all the ways that I want to succeed? Do I have the energy to take on my day? Do I feel good in my skin? That's really what Eat Your Heart Out is all about.